There is a story that has been playing out since 2014. It's the story of how a new world order is being created.
Федерации Владимир Владимирович.
The story of how old partnerships are disappearing and new ones are emerging. It's the story of how Vladimir Putin has become increasingly isolated by the West since the invasion of Crimea in 2014 and has now been looking for new friends in Africa. More importantly, it's a story of how Africa has become increasingly more important and attractive to Western powers and Russia. I think it is potentially one of the most important stories that is currently playing out that people are not paying attention to. It is a story for which I am willing to make a strong prediction. I have taken the time to write down my prediction on this paper right here, which I want to share with you at the end of this video. But before I do that, I want to share my rationale for this prediction. The story of Russia in Africa can really be broken down in three parts. First, there is what the West is saying about Russia in Africa. Then there is what Russia is actually doing in Africa. And the third one is what Africans are actually thinking of Russia in Africa. We have to look at all three of these parts all together because they're all equally important. But before we even start, let's address the elephant in the room. Why are Russians and Western powers interested in Africa? Well, because of African resources. Let's be honest here.
A continent of 54 sovereign states, 17% of the world's population, 9.6% of the global oil output, 90% of the world's platinum supply, 90% of the world's cobalt supply, half of the world's gold supply, 2/3 of the world's manganese, 35% of the world's uranium, 75% of the world's coltan, and 54 votes in the United Nations General Assembly. This is what makes Africa so attractive.
It is no secret that all these powers want to access African resources. It is something that has been true for years and years and decades and even centuries at this point. But people have different ways of approaching this strategy. For the Western powers, they've traditionally been closer to Africa than Russia, which is true. And so today, when they see Russia coming to Africa, they are scared. They are fearing that they are going to lose their spot. So they have been putting a lot of dirt on Russia in the media. Let's just take the case of France. President Macron went on a tour in Africa this past summer, and all he did was talk about Russia, which is crazy.
The president's criticisms of Russia's ambitions in Africa was something he really repeated throughout the trip.
Absolutely. This was really his motto during the three stages of this first African trip since his re-elections. He attacked Russia because of its war in Ukraine, but also he attacked Russia for what he called the imperialist ambitions of Russia in Africa, directly in the case of Mali, we just heard about, or in the Central African Republic. But he also said that Russia was waging a disinformation war using all kind of media, social networks to spread false information, especially about the role of France.
It is pretty clear that Western powers are afraid of Russia in Africa because, let's be honest, they don't want to lose their spot. They don't want to lose what they took for granted. And if you think about it, it's the same story that has been playing out with China in Africa. There is a clear fear coming from the West about Russia in Africa. But we have to really take a step back and ask ourselves, is this actually true? Should we take for truth everything that the West is telling Africans about Russia? I mean, the West has been fighting the fight with Russia, but as Africans, should we side with the West? Or should we make our own rational analysis and then make a decision? Of course, by now, I hope I don't have to tell you what my answer is. I think it's pretty clear that we have to make our own decision. And besides putting dirt on Russia, the West has been using different kind of strategy. One is they are sending some of the leaders there. President Macron from France went there. Anthony Blinken, who is the Secretary of State from the Biden administration, took his first trip to Africa this past summer. And they are not the only one going. the president of the EU also went to Africa to announce a new deal they want to sign with Morocco. This is part of a bigger project called Global Gateway, and it's a 300 billion plan in which Europe plans to invest 150 billion in Africa.
In the coming 5 years, as part of a worldwide 300 billion euros plan dubbed Global Gateway, the EU is planning to commit up to 150 billion euros of that 300 billion to financially support green energy and digital infrastructure projects in the African countries, and in this way enter the game for global geopolitical influence.
But let's not be naive. We have to ask ourselves, why is this happening right now? Why is Europe, after years of not really engaging with Africa anymore, they had other priorities, are now saying we have to deal with Africa? Why are they coming back? And we have to say it like it is. Russia is strangling Europe. They are cutting down the energy supply, and Europe has no other choice now.
Putin's government has a controlling stake in the biggest gas company in Russia, which means that Putin himself can give the order to turn off the taps on these pipelines. Turn them off, and that's exactly what he did.
European gas prices again reached near record highs on
Gas
Monday.
prices up 43% last week.
Gazprom says it is indefinitely halting the flow of gas through a key pipeline to
We are working hard to become independent of this gas supply.
And the question I always have...
And with this, Europe is understanding that, hey man, I have to find a new way to get my energy, or else my people are gonna come at me. So they're remembering their neighbors from the south. They're remembering the Africans, and they're coming to now deal with Africa. But instead of coming in peace and saying, hey, we want to deal with you, let's deal together. No. They're saying, please don't deal with China and Russia, only deal with us. We have the good deals for you. Should we listen to them? Are they right? Should we be fearing Russia? Is Russia a bad, evil villain that is going to come and cut our throats? Are they really bad for us? Well, I'm going to give you the answer, but first, let's understand how Russia actually even came to Africa, because Russia historically has not colonized any African countries. And the reason really is, it's not because they're good out of their heart. They have tried, but Russia was too far from Africa to actually colonize Africa.
Russia had no quick means to access the continent. The northern route was long and the port of Arkhangelsk was frozen for half the year anyway. The Baltic Sea route meant that Russia had to pass Germany, Denmark, the United Kingdom, the other United Kingdom and France, all of whom could make leaving the Baltic Sea incredibly difficult if they wanted to. The third route was via the Dardanelles, which could be blocked quite easily by the Ottomans, and even if they did get out, exiting the Mediterranean could be blocked by the British. And the fourth route meant travelling around the entire continent of Asia, which was long and expensive. So no. As such, Russia's grip and potentially even trade with any colonies in Africa would be tenuous at best.
And although many African leaders studied in the Soviet Union back in the days, and the Soviet Union had kind of some relationship with some African countries, it wasn't anything as big as today. Let's not forget that in 2019, Russia had the first ever Russia-Africa summit. This didn't come out of nowhere. We have to trace it back to 2014. In 2014, Russia invaded Crimea. The West cut ties with Russia. They were like, no, we don't want to deal with you. So Russia had to find new friends, new allies. First, they went to China. China had just elected President Xi in 2013, and this was the perfect time for Putin to now be friends with a rising superpower as China. 5 years later, Putin decided that maybe Africa could be a good bet. And this is when he had the first Russia-Africa summit. And the funny thing with all of that is that right when he had the summit with Africa, Europe lost their mind. That's when they started running the media campaign. Let's just look at this video from 2019 after the Russia-Africa summit.
Well, Moscow specializes in these cheap arm deals because this is something that gives Putin power all over the continent. This is about military cooperation, it's about strengthening the defense industries. We've seen this happening since 2014. It's been growing. So it means that about 19 African countries have signed deals with Putin already about strengthening the military cooperations.
I mean, did you hear what they said? She was saying that Russia is signing deals with Africa. I mean, that's bad, I guess. No, it's not bad. That's what countries do with each other. They have trade deals, they partner together. But when Russia, one of the enemies of Europe and the West, is doing it, for some reason, it is necessarily bad. The Africans are getting... And that is not the only thing. Let's look at another clip.
But also here, Russia seems to be acting out of self-interest. So they're striking a lot of deals or saying that they are going to cooperate more in the future. But actually what the outcome would be and how much money this will amount to in the future is very difficult to say concretely.
They are saying that Russia is being self-interested. Who else's interest is Russia supposed to look after? I mean, when countries deal with each other, everyone is looking for their own interest. This is pretty common sense. That's what you do as a country. And after this Russia-Africa summit, you started seeing more and more attack on Russia for dealing with Africa. And more articles, think tank, papers, whatever, saying that Africa should not deal with Russia. And what Russia really did at that time that I think Putin or whoever did it was smart is that they started running propaganda in African countries. Now, is this a good thing? Is this right? I don't think so. But this is how the world works. There's no free lunch. People will hit you when you're down. Putin took advantage of what was happening in Africa and especially in ex-French colonies, where the population were rising against France. They were saying, "We are tired of you, France. Please leave the country." In Mali, for example, France has been there since 2012 fighting a war that seems to have no end. And people are wondering if they're actually stealing from Malians. I'm not saying this is true, but this is how people were feeling.
The video pushes an anti-France sentiment while promoting Russia as an ally.
What I want is a country that will seriously help us. I hope that Russia will save us.
And this is something I saw in Mali with my own eyes when I went this past summer. People were tired of France and they wanted a new alternative. And that's what President Vladimir Putin really truly understood. He understood that people wanted a new alternative. So what he did is he sold them arms. Go fight your war. He provided military, private mercenaries from the Wagner group. Is he wrong for doing that? Is he wrong for looking over his own country's interests? I don't think so. I think what the West is missing right here is that when Russia or China goes to Africa, they are quick to point out that Russia is not respecting democratic ideals. What they don't understand is that the local population could give less about democratic ideals. When someone is hungry, when someone is trying to protect their family and they're fearing for their own security, they don't care about any of that. All they want is someone who can provide security and help them. And this is what Russia has been doing.
We want our well-being, right? To move freely. Today we're safe. Children go to school, study, and we can see that. We wave the Russian flag to say thank you to Russia and Vladimir Putin.
So, of course, today they are winning in Africa. They are taking over the Western people's spot. And what about the crimes against humanity? You may ask. I do not condone those. And I think this is where African presidents need to draw the line. They shouldn't just give themselves away to Russia. That is not the approach. And that brings me to my long-term prediction that I have right here and that I said that I will share with you by the end of the video. What Russia is doing today and what the West is doing today in terms of Africa is showing that the cards are all in Africans' hands. It is now Africa's turn to call the shots. And I think that we are going to see in the next 50 years a rising Africa. One Africa that understands its strengths, its power, and its position in the global game of politics. This is a big statement. It is something that has been said over and over. The Africa Rising story is something that has been said for 20, 30, 50 years. But I think today, based on what I see on the field, based on the new generation of leaders, and based on some leaders even from today, such as Paul Kagame from Rwanda, we are seeing that there is potential that can actually materialize into success. So forget about Russia and Africa, forget about China and Africa, forget about the West and the US and Europe. I think we are going to be speaking about Africans helping other African countries and rising together because they are going to understand the critical role they play in today's world. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. My name is Nedd Ludd. If you enjoyed this video, I would love to hear from you. Write your comments below, hit the subscribe button, like the video, share it with your friends, share it with someone who you think may appreciate this take. I really appreciate your time. If you're watching all the way to here, you're a real supporter. I really, really, really appreciate you. And with that being said, I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.